George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Feel like this is my sister here. Vanessa Johnson. Vanessa is a griot. She's a storyteller. She's an artist in residence at the Matilda Joslyn Gage Foundation. She's also a recipient of a big award, so we'll talk about that as well. She's bicontinental, right? Between two continents. And so let's talk to Vanessa. Vanessa and I go way, way back from the time that when I first met Vanessa, she had an art gallery called Ethnic Images. And so we have her framed art in places in the house, but she also was right there with us. I think did I come to you the second year or the first year? Anyway, when we had this idea to do the Juneteenth festival.
Yes.
And I was like, hey, you want to do that? And so it was Vanessa, Risha, and I got her face.
Is it Karen? What was her name?
Karen Stroud. Karen Stroud, yes.
Yes.
Karen, don't hate her brother. You know, I just had to Karen Stroud, and then I'm thinking of Denfell Hammonds, and Risha, and of course Jesse. And then I handed over the reins. And then Vanessa did it for many years, and then on and on. So part of the early history of Juneteenth and what that meant for our community. So anyway, you got some big stuff going on. Tell me about this grant from the Mellon Foundation.
Yeah, I am just feeling so blessed, George. I am a recipient of the Mellon Foundation Creatives Rebuild New York grant for 2022 through 2024. So I'm actually being paid to be an artist and being paid a decent salary, a recognized salary for the work that artists do.
That's beautiful. And so you're also doing that work. And in fact, this was an initiative. I recall it was an initiative for either artists or arts organizations to do exactly what you do, and that must have been for artists who their craft is their craft. It must have been really good to have a little consistency there.
Yeah, and to not, for me, I'm always hustling for, like all artists, musicians, painters, storytellers, all of the different ways that we use our expression to make a living. You're always hustling. And and starting out to do your radio show, you're always looking for gigs. You're always looking for opportunities to show people what you can do. You count on those referrals. And, I became a full-time artist in 2005 when I left the Onondaga Historical Association. And people would call me at 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I didn't want to call too early because I know now you work for yourself. You can sleep in. I'm like, I've been up since 4:30. If I don't work, if I don't hustle, if I don't look for gigs, if I'm not sending out emails and inquiries and stuff, then I don't have a paycheck at the end of the week. I don't eat. So it's a very brave thing that I think that artists do in taking that chance and doing the work that they want to do. Over 3,000 artists, between 3,000 and 4,000 artists across New York State applied for this grant, and 300 of us got it. Like I said, I'm humbled and blessed by it. And as we talk, I'll tell you ways that I'm trying to share the bounty with other artists, because I do feel humbled by that.
Well, let's start right there. How are you sharing the bounty with other artists?
Well, to be paid a salary to do what you do is a luxury as an artist. And I have to say also that the Mellon Foundation has a second program that I think 3,000 artists won or something like that, where they're getting paid $1,000 a month for 18 months. So there's this second one that was about showing financial need and loss from COVID. Both of these streams of funding from the Mellon Foundation were COVID inspired. And Chayla Surratt was the leader, the spokesperson and leader, was a part of a team that helped come up with what this grant was going to look like. So we not only have this wonderful salary, but we also have health insurance, we have vision insurance, we have dental insurance, all the things that most artists have not been able to afford.
All in this package. That's beautiful.
All in this package. I just feel so blessed. And so knowing that so many other artists right here in Syracuse applied and didn't get it, very deserving artists. I mean, everyone couldn't get this grant. What I've been trying to do is to share my bounty with other artists in several ways. I was able to bring a drawing artist into my Griot Guides program at the Community Folk Art Center. I stepped back. I didn't accept a salary during that month, a payment during those weeks during the month of November and beginning of December, and had the Community Folk Art Gallery pay her instead of me, because I have this pot of money coming in every month. I have been working, mentoring a poet, and helped her write a grant with the Central New York artists, and hooking her up with things like the Black Artist Collective, that kind of stuff. I've done that with a couple of artists now, referring them to contacts where they can learn about this kind of funding when it comes along. I volunteer on Tuesdays to do a creative writing group called Power of the Pen with girls at Brady Faith Center, right across from Southwest Center. These are girls from our community, and so growing their creative writing skills, and for them to learn the power of pen, the power of expression, and finding their voices for now and for the future for them. And lastly, I'm volunteering with RISE. It's Refugee Immigrant Empowerment Organization, that self-empowerment organization, RISE, on the north side of Syracuse, working with 20 new American girls, mostly from Africa and some from the Middle East. So that's my give back. And then I'm going to be paying artists from the grant to come in and do some work with them throughout the year. So I got a pot of money, and the Gage Foundation got a pot of money to support the work that I'm doing. So we're able to provide transportation. We're able to bring other artists in to share their skills. We're going to be taking the girls on field trips to women's sites, because this is about women's history, but women's sites around Central New York. A small group of them are going to New York City to see the African burial grounds. Another small group is going to be going to the Albany, and we hope to meet some of the women legislators that are there. But so this grant has just been something that I've just tried to just spread around the community.
That's a beautiful thing. Vanessa Johnson, artist in residence at the Matilda Joslyn Gage Foundation. Talk to me about your work at Gage and who Matilda Joslyn Gage is, and Sally Ross Wagner and her role and all of that.
Yes. I met Sally at the end of the 90s when I was still working for Southwest Community Center. And it's a long, funny story, but just briefly, I crashed a tea party on Halloween evening that she was giving in her apartment as a fundraiser for the Gage Foundation. I was with another friend, and we were just silly and crashed this in our Halloween costumes, this very serious older woman kind of thunder tea party. And Sally laughed and thought it was a joke. I then met her about 3 years later when I was working with the Historical Association, and we were part of the Central New York's marking of the the Freedom Trail. Of the sites in our county that were part of the Underground Railroad. And there was a meeting at the Gage building, the house where Matilda Joslyn Gage lived. And it was all of these people from all over the state that were a part of this Freedom Trail marking. And we're going around introducing ourselves. And she says, "I remember you," and she talked about how I crashed her tea party. I thought I was it was years ago in the clear, but I wasn't. And so this friendship grew. So by the time the Gage Foundation House opened in 2010, I had been a consultant on how things would be interpreted in the building. And I designed the Underground Railroad room, working with a local carpenter and with Mardia Warner, the late Mardia Warner, an amazing artist, and I know. And in Syracuse, who has left her mark on that building. And so I then was a part of the beginning of the Matilda Joslyn Gage Girl Ambassador Program, formed by the U.S. State Department and the American Museum Association and the International Sites of Conscience, where we work with girls, one of them your daughter, around leadership and them talking and exploring with girls in Chile and in Sri Lanka. Matilda Joslyn Gage was a feminist in the 1800s. She lived at this house, the Gage Center, and raised her children there. And it was where she and Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton met. And they wrote most of what has been written about the women's rights movement. Matilda Joslyn Gage was a main speaker for the movement at the time, until she fell apart with mostly Susan B. Anthony over issues of race and how race was going to play in women getting the right to vote after the Civil War. So she's, I think, just an amazing role model out of that time period. And for me, my attachment to the Gage Foundation has been to make sure women of color stories are told in that house. They got funding from the state, from the Underground Railroad Trail. I want to make sure that we have a voice there, and that our young people are involved in that history in our house, and that women, so many stories about Black women are unknown in our work in the women's rights movement. So one of the projects I am doing in these 2 years is creating a quilt exhibit that will travel, that is about women of color in the women's rights movement. This is the Martin Luther King Jr. His actual birthday today, the federal holiday celebrated tomorrow. How do you reflect on the Martin Luther King Jr. legacy in 2023? I think it's so important that we continue to celebrate his birthday, that he is not forgotten. And in a time period in this country where they want to control the voices of history, they want to erase history, they want to rename slavery as migration, all of this nonsense that's going on in our country, it is important for us as African Americans to make sure that this history is spoken, it is told, it is retold, and to fight for our children's right to know their history, for it to be incorporated in schools and in curriculums. There was just a posting about another state governor erasing part of history and not using the word Latinx, not naming Native Americans as indigenous, all of this kind of nonsense. So especially if our community does not claim this holiday and ensure memory of who we are, and document that and pass it on, it will be systematically taken away.
Yeah, no, that's very important. And I think it's also remembering to read and talk and teach our children and discuss this within families, because we are responsible for educating our children, along with and in partnership with the educational systems that our children are in, whether it's public, private, or parochial. We must make sure that our kids are getting what they need at home. And I think that's part of what you do, right?
Yeah, in my storytelling, the stories that I tell, I tell African tales and women's stories, but it's Black women's stories. I tell children, one of my programs called Children Marching, about children, Black children that marched with King, that worked in the civil rights movement and had actions in their own communities around the country to make change. So I tell about the Underground Railroad. I tell about our enslavement and about our resiliency, because so many of our kids are taught to be ashamed of that we were in slavery. Like, but we weren't enslaved here by ourselves. This was something done to us. So why should our children feel shame about the history? And I think it's always presented wrong. How I present it is the strength that we have, the survival stories of the Underground Railroad and of Black abolitionists and Black freedom takers. I don't call them freedom seekers or fugitive slaves and giving them just a legal label. I give it a title of empowerment, and it is a word we use at the Matilda Joslyn Gage Foundation. Freedom takers. People took their freedoms. The average person who ran out of slavery was 14 years old and male, and they didn't have a Harriet Tubman, God bless her, to lead them north. They did it. And I said, or people like her. And that network was so important, but it wasn't accessible to everybody. And so thousands and thousands of young people ran on their own. So I think it's important to teach our history ourselves and to give it voice and to give it true voice. When I was a kid, I remember so profoundly in 6th grade and I loved the social study teacher that I had, but we never talked about any Black history. And there were like 3 sentences about slavery in our history book at the time. And I remember getting the stack of Scholastic magazines. We would look at them month to month, but there were none about Black people. And he gave us the stack to read, for fun over the summer. Most of them had Black people on the covers. It was like that history he had filtered out and, okay, well, this is just reading if you want to do it. And I had strong parents who taught us our history. It was blended into our life, blended into our day-to-day, blended into stories about our families. So it's Black parents that have to take that central role in making sure our kids know their history. Have books in the house, have conversations, tell the stories of their grandparents and great-great-grandparents and the struggles that they went to and the triumphs that they had. And to tell your own, everyone has challenges. We don't succeed at everything, but to tell the strengths of your struggle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was like, it's funny because many, even of my age group, my mom is a New Yorker, right? So she didn't grow up in the South to migrate. So the stories for my kids are very different. So it's now to the great grand that you get some of the stories. And still today, there's always a story. This is 2023. We know racism isn't over at all. But I think about where we have come, right? You got the King holiday. When we were doing Juneteenth, did you ever think in New York State or in the federal government, because Juneteenth has been a holiday in Texas for a long time as a state holiday since at least 1980, but that we would have a Juneteenth holiday. And now some people, look, for the revolutionaries out there, we know it's just a day, we got that. But would you have ever thought that while we were planning the early Juneteenth for this community, that we would actually have a Juneteenth holiday?
It was like it was up there with me of living to see our first Black president and a first Black woman vice president. It was right up there. And I think, part of it is knowing this validation for our children. Mm-hmm. It's like the whole issue of reparations, mm-hmm. That those are healing things to say, yes, wrong things were done to you, or yes, you guys have done amazing things and been a part of this country and contributed massively to the history of this country. That's what that Juneteenth holiday meant to me. It's like, it's just an affirmation. I mean, we don't need it. We've been celebrating it with our own community anyway, but it's that affirmation and recognition, like, yeah. You guys, we are finally going to recognize what you have contributed to this country.
I was in a school this week, and there was a group of young men who didn't understand that they were kings and that they had gifts. And what do you, when you come across young people who don't understand their greatness, how do you peel behind and to reach to help them to to see that they are the ancestor. They're the kings are part of their DNA, because I was talking with an educator, and there's almost a sense of these are people who are about to enter into the world, and they're just not seeing what they can contribute.
Yeah. They don't know themselves, because part of that is knowing fully, Sankofa, the idea of Sankofa, the bird, to reach back and to remember the past. I remember when Black Panther came out, and I did a program at a predominantly white school during the beginning of the run of it. And in fact, I was going that evening to go see Black Panther with a friend. And so I was invited, I did these assemblies, and then sometimes I also, in my packages that I offer, will do individual programs in small classroom situations. And so I was in a classroom, and there was 2 Black kids in the class. And so we were, I was doing, I think it was a talk about Africa Bound, because I've been taking kids to Africa for a long time, so that they can, on their own, see, I can lecture to you about who you are, that you're a king and queen, but until you make those connections across time and space, sometimes, kids need to see it for themselves. So we're talking about Africa and my travels there and what kids have learned, and doing storytelling about it. And this little girl comes up to me. I think this is like a 5th grade class. She comes up to me afterwards and she whispers, "Man, my mother, we saw Black Panther, and my mother said that we are from kings and queens. Is that true?"
Whoa.
And I was like, "Yes, we are." And I talked about the lineages in Ghana, what I know, what I've experienced there. And she was like, "My mother was telling the truth." I said, "Yes, your mother, when she tells you something like this about history, you're not going to get this in school. We know you're not going to get it here. That's why I'm here." I said, "So you believe your mother?" "Yes, we were kings and queens." And many of the kings and queens that they show, like out of Egypt and stuff, and they whitewash them. I said, when you look back in time, who those people were and the color they were in that time period before mass migration through Egypt and stuff, yes, we are from kings and queens. And I said, you can go country by country by country. So I said, when you go to Ghana, some of the chiefs, people that lead their villages, are chiefs, and some of them are kings. It just depends on their lineage and title. I said, it was funny because after that I did a storytell. I put it to music with my head of my band, Matilda Joslyn, with Bernie Williford, and we put that whole conversation to music. And I remember doing it in a performance at McKinley Brighton School, and we rocked the cafeteria. The mothers were like, "Yeah!" And the fathers like, "Yeah!" Like just this recognition. The kids were kind of looking at them, and everybody's rocking to this. And then kids just flooded up front. "We were kings and queens." Yes, we were kings and queens. So if we don't tell our children, then they don't know all of who they are. And if we don't give them the history of Africa, and balance it with the stories of enslavement that are about resistance and resiliency, not, "Oh, poor me," then we're not giving them the whole picture of who they are. And we're beginning the lives of our children at 0 each generation, instead of saying you are part of a continuum of rising. A continuum of rising.
I love that.
And there are expectations that you owe the ancestors, and meaning their grandparents and great-great-grandparents and great-great-greats. Those are the ancestors. They're not people 6,000 years ago. But we're talking about your family. And what did your grandfather, or for the age of kids now, your great-grandfather survive in Jim Crow South, so that you could be sitting where you are? And yeah, life isn't fair. Life is not easy. And yeah, you're going through stuff now. But if we can survive the Middle Passage, and we can survive enslavement, and we can survive lynchings and Jim Crow South and stuff, then you can meet the challenges of today. And that's what we have to give our kids.
Ashe. Vanessa Johnson. She's a Griot storyteller, Mellon Foundation recipient, artist in residence at the Matilda Joslyn Gage Foundation, and a friend. Just a friend. Vanessa, thank you so much. How do people find you?
They can find me. I have a website, Vanessa Johnson Storyteller, all one word.com.
VanessaJohnsonStoryteller.com. A friend and somebody who we feel good about here on Inspiration for the Nation. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you, George, always. Thank you.